Should I buy an iPad or a Mac if I'm a student? That's one of the questions that I get asked daily. And today I wanted to go over the best and the worst on having an iPad and a Mac if you're a student. And at the end of the video, I'll tell you which one you should buy if you're a student, if you're in high school and college. Let's do this. Now first, let's talk portability. Now obviously both devices are extremely portable. If we talk about the MacBook Air, for example, it is extremely portable. I obviously have to say that the iPad is more portable in a way. It is lighter and easier to carry around campus. It's ideal for quick note-taking and reading on the go. So if you just want to pop out your iPad from your backpack, it is definitely not the same that grabbing your MacBook, opening it, unlocking it. It's not the same because, as I said, for quick tasks such as note-taking or reading something, it's basically like your iPhone. It's just easier and snappier to do. And then the Mac is equally as portable, obviously, but it is more robust for multitasking and basically handling heavier software needs. The way that I always describe both devices is that the iPad is an iPad when you need it, it's a tablet when you need it, but it's also a laptop when you need it by simply adding a Magic Keyboard. And then you add the Apple Pencil, and it's also a notebook when you need it. And then on the other side, the MacBook is just a laptop when you need it. That's it. And I don't mean that as a bad thing, because I guess the iPad is just a way much more fun way to work because you've got so many different options and accessories to play with, to get rid of, to add. And then the Mac is just a Mac. A more serious way of working is definitely not a bad thing. It's just both different. Now, the obvious main difference, as I said, is its accessories. So let's go ahead and talk about note-taking, which is one of the most important things that students need. Now, you've got a lot of different ways that you can actually note-take with your iPad. You can use it with a keyboard, without the keyboard, with the Apple Pencil, or without the Apple Pencil. And let's go ahead and start talking about the Apple Pencil. And for me, in terms of note-taking in particular, the iPad just wins. The iPad gives you so many different options and versatility for your student life, from handwriting your actual notes, using apps like Apple Notes or Notability. With Apple Pencil, you can pinch to access your tool palette, you can double tap to access the eraser tool. And the best thing about the Apple Pencil is that it doesn't feel like a stylus. It truly feels like its name. It truly feels like a pencil that is extremely accurate, just like a pencil or a pen would, making note-taking extremely familiar. Now, apart from handwriting your actual notes, the best thing about it is that you can also mark up your document. A tip that I always like to give students is, did you know that you can actually export, you can also do this on the Mac. If you go on Safari, you can actually export a specific website that you might be researching for your homework or for an assignment, and then open it as a PDF, and then obviously use the Apple Pencil so you can actually mark up or highlight certain things that you find interesting for your essay, for example. The brand new Apple Pencil Pro, by the way, now has Apple Find My, which is incredibly useful if you're a student. I've lost a lot of Apple Pencils in my student life, and this actually telling me where it is at all times, just similar to Find My iPhone, is obviously incredible. Now you can also add a Magic Keyboard or Logitech Combo Touch to your iPad, and both of these keyboards actually use the smart connector on your iPad, which is basically those pins on the back of your iPad, which basically lets your keyboard connect to your iPad without needing Bluetooth. So you basically just put your iPad onto your keyboard and the keyboard will automatically work. Now there's obviously a bunch of different iPads in the lineup, from the iPad mini, the Air, the Pro big one, the small one. Now I've made an entire video on which iPad you should get if you're a student, so if you're interested in that, links in the description. Now the reason that I'm saying this is actually handwriting your notes, or actually using especially the keyboard on a 13-inch iPad rather than an 11-inch iPad changes a lot of things, because in my opinion, switching up to the MacBook now for note-taking, it's just a joy to use. Obviously, the keyboard on the Mac has been perfected for so many years, and as of right now, the MacBook Air, the MacBook Pro, both have an excellent Magic Keyboard. They're clicky, they're the right size, they're just familiar. Instead, with an iPad 11-inch, it's not bad, it's just a little bit more cramped, and it just doesn't feel as comfortable. It's comfortable, but not as comfortable as just typing with a 13-inch keyboard, right? Now let's talk about apps and software and overall user experience with both devices, because here's where you truly feel the difference on both of them. Now, iPad runs iPadOS and the Mac runs, I just broke my Apple Pencil. And the Mac runs macOS. Now, the way that the Mac behaves, and you truly have to understand this in order to differentiate both devices, because this is extremely important, is that the Mac and macOS, the way that the Mac behaves is basically through files. The Mac is driven by files. Whenever you want to open a document, you first open the file and then the app opens. And on the iPad, it's the other way around, even though you can obviously open up a file from your iPad, I'm not saying that, but the way that the iPad behaves is with apps. Just like on the iPhone, you basically open up Microsoft Word and then you open the file. That's basically how Final Cut Pro works on the iPad as well. You first open up the apps and then the files. And that's a big difference for students. Now, this obviously depends on your major, if you're in high school, if you're in college, if you require a lot of extensive apps, for example. But just in terms of basic file management, the Mac does so much better, like miles better than the iPad. Now, the iPad still has file management, but it's nearly not as good as in the Mac. The Mac, you just expect things to work and they simply work. And on the iPad, 80% of the things just work the way that they should for students. But then there's this 20% that it's like, why isn't it working this way? And it's stupid things like file management. It's stupid things like a website just opening the way that you want it to open, and some websites not working, and obviously some programs not being compatible with the Mac, that we're gonna talk into that in just a second. But just keep that in mind. If you're someone that likes to work a lot with files, the iPad does it well, but nearly not as well as on the Mac. I define this comparison also with this phrase: the limitation of the iPad is its software, and the limitation of the Mac is its hardware. Because the hardware of the iPad, as I said in the beginning of the video, it's so portable. Just having an iPad, a keyboard, a pencil, there's so many different ways that you can use the iPad that makes it extremely portable and very useful for a lot of different occasions. The Mac, it's just the Mac that does Mac things really well, but it's just a Mac. Now, usually students are quite rough with their iPads. I mean, come on, admit it, I know you do. That's why today I wanted to show you today's sponsor, ESR. Starting off with their ultra tempered glass screen protector. It is 10 times stronger than any screen protector out there in the market. I mean, literally look at this, bending it like crazy, and it's not even breaking. Doesn't want to break. It's engineered to withstand up to 110 pounds of force on the edges. It's got superior military grade protection. It's highly tested and certified by the SGS. And what's funny is their internal testing actually goes beyond to what their actually certification means. It also passes the scratch test and doesn't even lower the screen clarity. The colors still feel vivid. It's also extremely easy to install. They actually have this kit where you put it in and just works. And then their magnetic case for iPad is also quite unique. Very similar to the Slim Folio from Apple, but obviously for a fraction of the price. It comes with this magnetic clasp, so you can actually ensure that your Apple Pencil doesn't actually fall when you're walking through class to class. It's also made to last, made out of very premium materials. I mean, it feels good. It's lightweight, it's portable. You've got different viewing angles for drawing, writing, watching content, watching movies. Obviously great accessories if you're a student. ESR, thank you so much for sponsoring this video and for making such a freaking awesome screen protector. I mean, whoa! Links in the description. Now, in terms of education apps, I feel like the iPad does a lot better. There's so many apps out there on the App Store for the iPad, and even its software from Apple actually has its own features that make it incredibly useful for students. For example, the new Math Notes feature on iPadOS 18 basically lets you handwrite your own math equations, and using AI, it will automatically do the equation for you, and it will even do graphs. It's just mind-blowing the way that it works, and it works extremely well. And that obviously comes with the Apple Pencil. There's apps like Notability, as I mentioned, and even Microsoft Word and Pages and all the education apps out there, Notion, all that stuff is on the iPad, and they all perform really well with the Apple Pencil. And then the Mac, in terms of apps, that's also one of its biggest weaknesses and strengths at the same time, because here's where my next point actually comes in as well, which is, depending on your college degree, I'd summarize it as this. If you study medicine or nursery, or if you're studying business, things that don't require specific programs to work, the iPad will do amazing for you. But if you're studying a creative degree, for example, if you're studying film or graphic design or music production, the iPad can produce music, the iPad can edit videos. But in college, obviously, your graphic design teacher won't be like, all right, let me show you how to design on iPad. That's probably not gonna be the case. In my case, for example, I studied graphic design, and even though I love the iPad so much for a lot of things, I obviously just needed a Mac to run Adobe Photoshop, Affinity Designer, Final Cut, Adobe Premiere, After Effects. Some apps are even on the iPad now, such as Final Cut Pro and Affinity Photo and music production. It can do all of that, but you'll literally need a Mac or a PC in order to do specific college degrees. So definitely keep that in mind because that is extremely important. Now, in terms of battery life, both the iPad and the MacBook do incredible at battery life. Both devices will obviously last you the entire day. Obviously depends on the model and obviously depends on the usage. Typically, if you decide to buy a Mac, that probably means that you actually need Pro apps, which means that those Pro apps will actually make the battery of your Mac just go down like crazy. But I wouldn't say there's a specific winner or loser in terms of battery life. Both of them will do incredibly well. Now, probably the most important thing for you is like, okay, all of this stuff is amazing, but how much does the iPad cost and how much does the Mac cost and what's the value here? I'll start off by saying that the iPad starts off great, but then if you wanna add the Apple Pencil, and then if you wanna add the Magic Keyboard, it starts to add up even more than the cheapest MacBook Air, for example. And that's why I often get this question from students, from you, because when you go to an Apple store and you wanna buy a productivity device for college, the first question that comes to you is, should I buy an iPad or a Mac? And I even got to interview Chief Marketing Officer at Apple, Jaws, and John Turnus, Head of Hardware Engineering at Apple. And I even asked Jaws this question, should people buy an iPad or a Mac? And here's what he had to say.
We've got the Mac and we've got the iPad. And the iPad is slowly becoming more like the Mac in a way. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I don't agree. Look, they're different tools, right? People have asked us that for years. Is one trying to replace the others? Mac trying to replace iPad? Is iPad trying to replace Mac? No, the reality is no. They're different tools.
If you want to watch the entire episode, it's free on Apple Podcast and Spotify. And if you actually want to watch the podcast in video, it's available for all channel members. If you want to become a channel member, just for $2.99, you can actually have access to all the podcasts from inside the ecosystem, including the sexy t-shirt that you can buy in InsideTheEcosystem.com. Keep on moving. So I would honestly say in terms of value, a MacBook Air is probably one of the best choices out there right now, because if you actually want to decide on buying the keyboard and the pencil, as I said, it even costs more than the iPad, but don't worry, I'll tell you at the end which one should you buy. And in terms of MacBook, I'll also link down below in the description my Mac buyer's guide for students. Should you buy an iMac, a MacBook Pro, a MacBook Air, a Mac Mini, a Mac Studio, all of those options linked down below in the description if you want to watch my student guide. Another point that I wanted to make is don't forget that the iPad is a touchscreen and the Mac doesn't have a touchscreen, which makes it incredibly useful for productivity, for the Apple Pencil in a lot of ways. And it also behaves like an iPhone. It's very intuitive, but also at the same time, there's a lot of instances on Safari, for example, that touch and the touchscreen isn't always the best choice. So as I said in the beginning of the video, there's a lot of instances that you're like, why is it doing this? And on the Mac, it doesn't really happen. The Mac offers a traditional experience like any Mac, any PC you've used, and it obviously integrates as well with the Apple ecosystem. Don't forget, you've still got AirDrop, iMessage, and all of the best Apple ecosystem features. So let's summarize everything that I've just said. The benefits on using an iPad is the Apple Pencil support. You've also got a camera to actually scan and take photos of your homework. The education-focused apps on iPad is one of its strengths, using Notability or GoodNotes. And most importantly, the versatility that an iPad gives you, and using an Apple Pencil without it, using it as an iPad, using it as a laptop with the Magic Keyboard. And then the benefits of the Mac is most importantly, the file organization is top-notch. The viewing angles are obviously superior on the Mac. The iPad, it's got its limits. The Mac, you can literally open it all the way. Pro apps on the Mac are available, something that the iPad does have, but also doesn't at the same time. And then the Mac just has a more reliable user experience, something that the iPad, with that 20%, as I said in the video, just doesn't have. So the final verdict, should you buy an iPad or a Mac if you're a student? Now the answer is not as easy as I'm gonna make it sound. It honestly depends on your major, what you're studying, but I'll summarize it like this. If your major lets you buy an iPad, meaning you don't need those pro apps, those pro workflows. Go ahead and buy an iPad, because at the end of the day, it's just more fun. You're gonna use it a lot more. You're gonna have that tablet feeling also for entertainment. If you wanna relax a little bit from all that work, you're actually gonna have a tablet on to watch movies. Of course, you can also watch movies on the Mac, but it's really not the same. The Apple Pencil, the portability, everything the iPad involves, for me, it's just a better solution if you're a student. On the other hand though, there's this one Mac that I just absolutely recommend for all students. And if you actually wanna know which one that is, I highly recommend it. You can actually watch this video right here, the student guides on the Mac. Or if you don't know, you're like, okay, Nikki, I don't want a Mac. I wanna buy an iPad. Which one should you buy? You can tap this video. Or if I helped you out, the least thing you can do is subscribe. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.